1927 Mississippi River floods.
The Mississippi River flooded after months of persistent heavy rainfall that started in the summer of 1926 and continued into the spring of 1927. Runoff from the rains combined with tributaries, tightening the water height and speed of the Mississippi River. After a while, the levees protecting the Mississippi floodplains gave way, causing massive flooding. While floods are a common occurrence at the Mississippi River and are often caused due to rainfall and snow, this event was an uncommon occurrence due to the massive damage that occurred. This event is considered one of the worst natural disasters in American history. And as you can see here, this is some pictures that were taken after the flooding occurred and while the flooding was obviously occurring. So on the bottom right, you can see the flooding got so bad that at certain points, people had to literally use boats just to get around. And as you can see, houses were also either completely destroyed or completely flooded.
So despite worry by public officials that the levees were unable to handle the amount of heavy rainwater, the United States Army Corps of Engineers continually downplayed the fears of levee failure and assured the public that everything would be fine. But when the levees broke on April 22nd, 1927, the floodwaters created a huge crevice 100 feet deep and about half a mile wide. It was not until July 1st that the water began to recede, but flooding was still around 70 miles wide in certain areas. Flooding of the Mississippi River extended across many states, including Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Kentucky, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. The area of the flooding was so large that at its peak, it was around the same size as New England. And here we can see the crevice I was just talking about and how wide it extended away from the flow of the Mississippi River.
Right. So the economic impacts from the flooding was devastating for residents. Property damage was estimated to be around $350 million, which in today's world is basically around $5 billion, which is insane. Additionally, around 637,000 people were homeless for months following the event, and most of them were minorities. There was also massive infrastructure damage, and most livestock and crops were destroyed in the flood. The societal impacts of the flooding exacerbated the belief for many Americans that the South was once again in crisis. Many viewed the African Americans and poor whites in the areas as left behind groups that constantly needed to be bailed out by Northern citizens. And as we can see here, this is basically a lot of survivors following the flooding ended up staying in tent cities while they waited for the floodwaters to recede.
In response to the massive flooding, Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover responded to the situation as effectively as he could. Hoover assembled ships to ferry supplies. He oversaw the creation of tent cities for the homeless and made mass radio broadcasts calling for donations to the Red Cross to help survivors. Also, the Flood Control Act of 1928 was passed to include policies that required local and state governments to maintain flood control levees and post-construction maintenance. This act also gave the federal government the authority over managing the Mississippi River, leading to the Mississippi River and Tributaries Project. This project focuses on creating levees and flood walls, channel improvement and stabilization, floodways, and tributary basin improvement that all work together to inhibit future flooding from occurring. Many African American communities in the area left following the flooding and moved to areas such as Chicago, enriching the Chicago blues music after telling stories about the flood. And here we see Herbert Hoover making a radio broadcast asking for donations to the Red Cross. And these are our citations.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for watching.